SABC says reports on the alleged plot to assassinate the United States ambassador to South Africa is receiving the necessary attention. Last night, an American publication released an article that accused the government of Iran of wanting to kill Ambassador Lana Marks as part of a revenge plan. This is in connection with the January assassination of Army General Qasem Soleimani by the U.S. drone strike. The agency says it's interacting with relevant bodies in the country and internationally to ensure that Ambassador Marks will be safe. It says diplomatic officials working within our borders are afforded the same. Minister Ayanda Dlodlo says that South Africa is duty-bound to protect all diplomats on state duty. The agency says no further details can be divulged to the public, but a report will be sent to President Cyril Ramaphosa, the International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor, as well as relevant officials of the United States administration.
The agency has today noted reports about an alleged plot to assassinate the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Lana Marks. The agency has noted the rising public interest on this matter and would like to assure all South African citizens and interested parties that the matter is receiving the necessary attention. The agency is interacting with all relevant partners, both in the country and abroad, to ensure that no harm will be suffered by the U.S. ambassador, including any other diplomatic officials inside the borders of our country. The Minister of State Security, Minister Ayanda Dlodlo, says that South Africa has a duty to protect maximally all diplomatic officials who are on state duty in our country. It should be noted that the nature of the allegation and attendant threat doesn't permit us to give any detailed updates on the investigations. Reports in this regard shall be provided to all the relevant authorities, including the President of the Republic, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, and relevant officials in the United States administration.
That's a reaction there from the State Security Agency. For more now on the story, we're joined by our New York correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming through. We've heard what South Africa has to say regarding this issue. Talk to us about what the reaction has been to this report there.
I think it's also important, Palesa, just to take a step back and reference what we know in this developing story, right? All we have is a report from the Politico news website, which is a US-based political website, citing a US intelligence report, which the reporter has not seen, and quotes a US government official who is familiar with that report and another government official who has seen the intelligence. So, when you report on sort of reports that come from the Central Intelligence Agency, there's a lot of murkiness around it because you don't have names being referenced, you don't have on-the-record quotes, and essentially Politico saying that Iran was plotting to kill the U.S. ambassador to Pretoria, Lana Marks, in retaliation for the strike that was given the go-ahead by Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, against the Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani, who was killed through a drone strike while he was visiting Iraq in January this year. Of course, the Iranians have been on the record that they will seek vengeance or revenge, certainly, for this attack. And this report suggesting that Lana Marks, the ambassador to South Africa, had been identified. We have heard from Dr. Trista Parsi, who is the former president of the National Iran-American Council, essentially an NGO based in Washington that is essentially represents it's the largest representation of Iranians in the United States. He sent us this statement, Palesa. I'll read you a little bit of it. The story is likely another false leak by the Trump White House, potentially aimed at conditioning the American public for an October surprise with Iran. Of course, this is an election year, and when you talk about an October surprise, they mean something that could sway the election. But assassinating a largely, this is his words, irrelevant American ambassador who only got the job due to her support for Donald Trump in a state friendly to Iran makes little sense. It's difficult to imagine anyone within the Iranian elite accepting that as an appropriate retaliation for the killing of Soleimani, Iran's foremost general. South Africa, he says, has close and warm relations with Iran. It's a leader within the non-aligned movement. An assassination there would put considerable strain on Pretoria-Tehran relations at a time when Iran can't afford to get more isolated. So Dr. Parsi, the former president of the National Iran-American Council, coming out and saying that he's got a lot of questions about this Politico report, and I think that's where we find ourselves in the story, Palesa.
So has Iran responded to the report?
They have, yes. We got a statement earlier from the spokesperson of Iran's foreign ministry. His name is Saeed Khatibzadeh, and he has dismissed the anti-Tehran accusation raised in what he calls a custom-ordered report by a U.S. media outlet. He calls it custom-ordered, biased, and purposeful, resorting to hackneyed and worn-out methods of anti-Iran propaganda in the international arena. He calls these baseless allegations, but says it was predictable that the United States regime would resort to an anti-Iran accusation and falsification ahead of the U.S. president election. Again, a reference to that October surprise I was talking about, coupled with the U.S. regime's pressures to abuse the UN Security Council mechanisms with the purpose of intensifying pressure on the people of Iran. So a predictable statement coming out of the Iranian foreign ministry, essentially debunking the entire report, saying that this is a planted story by U.S. intelligence, and of course very difficult for us to verify because intelligence historically in the United States won't comment on the record on a story of this nature, Palesa.
And interestingly, Sherwin, this story comes after the Trump administration last month suffered that massive defeat in the U.S. Security Council in its efforts to reimpose all sanctions on Iran, of course accusing it of failing to comply with the terms of the historic 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Should this story then be seen in the broader context of the continued, perhaps a maximum pressure campaign that's imposed by Washington on Tehran?
Yeah, I would imagine so, right? You correctly point out that there has been a years-long maximum pressure campaign imposed by the Trump administration on the Iranian government. They withdrew, of course, the Trump administration from the JCPOA, essentially what's known as the Iran deal, in May of 2018, and as then sought to reimpose sanctions that would have been lifted in October, essentially an arms embargo that would be lifted as part of the process of that Iran deal that was signed in 2015 by all the major powers. The U.S. failed to get an extension in the UN Security Council in early August for that embargo to be extended. Essentially only getting 2 votes in support, so quite a repudiation from the 15 members for Washington, a real diplomatic blow, and then later tried to reimpose or trigger what is known as the snapback portion of the Iran nuclear deal, which essentially would allow all the sanctions that were lifted as part of that deal to be reimposed due to alleged non-compliance of that deal from Tehran. Of course, none of the council members, barring the Dominican Republic, supported Washington's proposal to reimpose snapback sanctions. So we have this stalemate now in the UN Security Council in the weeks ahead in terms of the US seeking to reimpose sanctions to a deal that it is no longer party to, of course, withdrawing from the JCPOA in 2018.
All right, Sherwin, we thank you so much for that update. Our U.S. correspondent there, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. All right, so as Sherwin reflected on the response from Iran, let me just quickly reflect on the statement released today. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson has described the report as custom ordered. He says it is biased and purposeful, and he says it cites the remarks made by a purportedly U.S. government official in an attempt to make it look real. So the statement says that as a responsible member of the international community, the Islamic Republic of Iran has approved its constant commitment to the international diplomatic principles and norms. We'll certainly have more for you regarding this issue. Coming back home now, the members of the